All right, I believe we are live. As always, I'm going to wait for that little red button on Rockfin to be sure, but I think that we're live right now on YouTube, on Rumble, on Twitter, and here in a second on Rockfin as soon as I click that go live button. There we go. All right, the moment of a heart attack. This is a Propaganda Report's Drive Time News Blast. I'm Brad Binkley. It's a special show tonight. I've told you guys a number of times on this show about my time living in Chicago when I was doing the Second City Conservatory program. And the one friend that I had up there who was also from the South, so we were like a novelty up there. And we had a pretty wild time up there. He is going to be a guest on the show today. Jack Hatley. He had a heart attack when he was 37 years old. And this has nothing to do with the vaccine. This was years ago. And he was telling me this story recently, and it's just, it's kind of a crazy story. And I think that hearing this story just can be beneficial and helpful to a lot of people. And I want you guys to hear it. So Jack is going to be on the show tonight, and he's going to tell us all about it. I'm going to bring him on now. Welcome to the Propaganda Report, Jack. It's good to see you.
Likewise, Brad. Thank you for having me.
How's it going?
It's going good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. You probably don't know this, but so Jack and I, we hadn't seen each other in probably like 16 years until maybe a month and a half ago when you had this conference in Atlanta. And then we hung out. We just picked up like it was, just the next day in Chicago 16 years ago, or in Tennessee, I think was the last time we hung out. But I talk about our time in Chicago quite a bit on the show because of how much of an impression it made on me.
It definitely made an impression of sorts on me too, for better or worse. But.
Right, yeah, they need earlier closing times at the bars in Chicago.
Yes,
I think,
they do. Yep.
For me. So, Jack, when you were 37 years old, I remember you telling me this, and I was shocked, and I was very thankful that you were okay. But you had a heart attack, and you told me the whole story when you were in Atlanta. What happened?
I did. So actually, I'm coming up on, or just had my 10-year anniversary of this in July. So this happened July 10th, 2013. It was the day after I turned 37. Obviously, wasn't expecting that. So I had what is called a widowmaker heart attack. And I don't know statistically, how many people don't make it when they have one of those, but it's high. I do know that. So,
yeah, a guy at the radio station that I used to work at, WSB, is a very popular guy on that station. I think he was in his 30s, and he used to do comedy as well a little bit. He had a heart attack, a widowmaker, and he didn't make it.
Yeah, it's widowmaker is when you have. I had 100% blockage in my LAD artery, and I believe I think it's left anterior descending. So yeah, it was not a good day. I was very fortunate in that I lived in very close proximity to a hospital where I will forever be indebted to those people that were there that day. So it was, I don't know, there was a lot of luck involved. And
you drove yourself to the hospital, right?
I did. And I was told that, that's obviously nobody is going to advise you to do that. However, I was told that there's a high likelihood that had I not done that I wouldn't have made it. So if I would have waited for an ambulance or something like that. So I don't know if that's true, but I wouldn't change anything about the way the situation unfolded.
Well, so take us through it from what you remember from the moment that you felt something wrong.
Yeah, it was, I live in Pittsburgh, and I was living in Pittsburgh at the time. And, it's not as hot as where I grew up in Texas, but I remember that particular day, it was probably 90 something degrees. And I was working in the yard. I was home by myself, and I just started sweating a whole lot, which was pretty uncharacteristic. And my heart was really just pounding. No pain. Um, but I thought maybe I just was getting like overheated or something, or I didn't know what to think. So I went inside, drank some water. That did nothing. Uh, Sweating didn't subside at all. So I, well, maybe if I like take a shower, that'll help. That didn't help. And so my brother-in-law, who is
How long of a time period was this from when it started to taking a shower?
um, I would say from the time I noticed that something was off to the time that I, it was, there was no doubt in my mind what was happening to me. I would say it was probably uh, 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's typical. That was my experience. And so, and
Your
at the time,
brother-in-law's, yeah.
yeah. And during that period of my life, and the probably like 5 to 10 years prior to that, I had panic attacks a lot. And so I knew if I called my wife or my brother-in-law, they would just say, "You're having a panic attack, just chill out." But so anyway, I decided to go over to his house. He's an, uh, an emergency room doctor. And so it's like, who better to bring this problem to? And
Yeah.
so I got in the car and started to drive there. And if
So
you're,
while this happening, how did your body feel? What your breath, was it heavy? Your arms, just everything that you
um,
felt.
I was still like, my heart was beating really hard, and I was hot and sweating. At that point, there was really no pain. Um, and I lived, if you're, if anyone is at all familiar with Pittsburgh, I lived in an area called the Mexican War Streets, which was on the north side of Pittsburgh. And my intent was to travel to the south side where my brother-in-law Brian lived. And I would say probably less than 100 yards from the entrance to the freeway. And I felt like a snap in my chest, like literally like just a snap feeling, and instant pain. It was like, I knew at that moment that I was in trouble.
What
And
was that? Do you know?
I don't know. I've wondered if maybe it was like the clot lodging. I don't know enough about. I'm not a medical professional, so I don't know what it was. But that's my guess, if that even is possible. But so yeah, things could not have lined up any better than they did, considering the gravity of the situation. And it just so happened that I had not gotten on the freeway, and there was a street where I could turn right and drive to this hospital that was about a mile away. And
So you had a choice, right? Of do I continue going to my brother-in-law's house, or do
yeah,
I veer
and that
off?
was that I jumped ship on that idea. There was no, I knew I needed to get somewhere where this could be dealt with, and I
Yeah,
needed to do it
and it
probably
saved your
pretty
life.
fast. And so it was, I was driving, faster than I should have, but I I made it there. I had to park the car, which is something kind of an odd thing when you're like in the midst of what you think
It was
is a
like an
heart attack.
emergency room where the ambulances go.
Yeah,
Or
and you have to look for a parking spot,
oh my gosh.
and go through a metal detector, upon walking
Did,
into
did you
the.
get the wand as this was going? You're having a heart attack. Did they check you
Well,
for?
they did. They did stop me for sure, and I was like, a little baffled by, but I don't know. I guess there's some characters going in and out of there, but yeah. So I got there and just kind of fell into this desk and was kind of a mess, and they had me off, like up on a, you know, gurney or
So they
stretcher or
took you
whatever you
back
call it.
right away when you went in. You didn't have to go in the
Yeah, there
waiting
was
room.
no,
Or,
no,
yeah.
they didn't even know my name at that point. I don't think I didn't even get that far. So, but what was, um, it was bothersome to me at the time. They kept asking me what kind of drugs that I had done. And I was like, I have not done any drugs. I don't, and, but they were just insistent that I tell them what kind of drugs I had done. I was
Did they,
like,
they
look,
thought you had overdosed?
I don't know what they thought I had done, but they, I guess, given my age, and you just don't, it's not a common sight, somebody
Yeah.
in their 30s coming in like that. But so they finally said, if we drug tested you, what would we find? I was like, you wouldn't find anything. So, and eventually the guy was like, I'm sorry, I kept having to ask you that. I guess maybe it affects the way that they treat you, like for pain or what. I don't know. But so there was a lot of that. And then I, uh, I remember being in the, back in the emergency room, and I had all these people running around, like looking at me. And um, that's what I remember the most, probably about the whole thing. Um, it's just, I remember seeing, like, on the wall in front of me, there's this big clock, and they were giving me, I think, fentanyl and Dilaudid, which are obviously very strong drugs. And in this case, they were used for pain. And I just remember looking at that clock and looking around and realizing I don't know any of these people. And I, and at that point, I'm like, I guess I'm gonna die. I don't know. I guess that's what happens here. But
Were you able to communicate at that point?
yeah, I was, and I still have a vivid recollection of it. And the thing I remember most was a doctor who was not even in on my case. He just happened to be walking through, and I think he sensed how freaked out I was, and he took the time and came over, and he was like, asked me my name. He's like, how are you doing? Like, I asked him just point blank, am I going to die? And he was like, um, well, probably so, but I don't think you're going to today. And he was, and I remembered his name the next day, and I communicated with him briefly after that, several months or maybe weeks after that, just thanking him for taking the time to do that, because you have a bunch of people in the room who they're focusing on, their job is to keep you alive. They don't really have time to chit chat with you, make you feel better. So, but from that point, they took me into a cardiac cath lab, and they put 2 stents in. They go through your femoral artery, or they did that time. They can go through your wrist as well. But so they did that, and here I am 10 years later. And
Yeah. What does that do? That opens up the blockage?
it does. Yeah. So, and they, I think that they have some sort of medication in them that as well, but that, yes, they do open up in that case, the artery.
And if you would have waited, didn't you say if you would have waited like any minute or a couple minutes longer, that it would have been a different outcome?
I mean, I guess it's just, you can only speculate on that, but I had a number of people at the hospital tell me that. They said, you're extremely lucky to have gone through something like that. And I think that that made it harder for me to kind of come to terms with everything in the days that followed, and actually like the year and a half after that. When somebody's telling you these things like, hey man, you dodged a bullet. So
what was the treatment like moving forward? What was a lifestyle change, or what causes it? I don't know anything about these things.
So I was about a week later after I got out of the hospital. I was in the ICU for a couple of days, and then there, or like a step down room. And then about, I don't know, 4 or 5 days later, I was connected with a cardiologist. Matter of fact, I still go to the same cardiologist. Great guy. Has been amazing since day one. And I think he realized from the get-go that I was like, it affected me, kind of my mental state. I just was worried about, it's constantly worried about whether or not it was going to happen again.
I'm sure. Like you didn't see it coming. There weren't anything
No.
that warned you about it. That's terrifying.
So he put me on some medication, and like a cholesterol like a statin for cholesterol, and then a beta blocker, which in my case, it helps make your heart work. It just makes it work very efficiently. And it helps with my blood pressure. And I'll come back to that specific medication later. But
was your blood pressure high at the time?
It was, yeah. And I had just started kind of several months prior to all this, sort of trying to take some steps in the direction of maybe addressing that better. I had been on blood pressure medicine, but it just wasn't really doing anything. And
yeah, I mean, that's an easy thing to be like, I'll get to it later.
It's exactly what I did. And but in addition to the medication, my cardiologist gave me the option of going through something called cardiac rehab. And that helped me tremendously. It was not only physically, but I was afraid to leave my house or leave anywhere that wasn't, a few blocks from a hospital. And
yeah, I would be paranoid if I were in that situation. Just what a scary thing.
So this was great because it was in a hospital. So I knew it's like, if something happened, I was in the right spot. But it started rebuilding my confidence, and physically it helped me get back on track. I remember the very first day I went to it, I did these exercises, I would say probably less than 10 minutes, and I couldn't even make it out of the waiting area afterwards, I sat down and like fell asleep because I was just like, uh, it just took that much of a toll on me,
What kind of
physically.
exercises was it?
Um, in that particular program, it was like treadmill, a lot of treadmill. Um, Trying to think, there were basically some things that they can get your heart kind of going, and you have a heart monitor on the whole time. And but I started feeling better and started feeling more confident. And when the course of that was up, I asked my doctor if it was possible that I kept going with it, and so he arranged for that to happen. I did get to do it for I don't remember how many more weeks, but I would say that was a huge, huge help. But, but it beyond that, the things that I struggled with the most were um, this is before I had any kids, so it was just me and my wife Amy. And when she would go to bed, I would just sit up, and this happened for probably, I would say, a year, um, to where I just absolutely could not go to sleep, and because all I did was worry, when is this going to happen again? And so I can't tell you how many books I read that year, but I would just stay awake basically until I just, like
Yeah.
physically just.
Yeah, they call it a silent killer, if I recall correctly. What did you learn for because what you described when you first started feeling something off is a situation that a lot of people feel and probably would not go to the hospital. They might write it off as just, maybe they're hot or they didn't get enough sleep or whatever else, anything
Yeah.
but the worst case scenario. And so that happened to you. And fortunately, you made the correct decision to go find somebody who can help. But what did you learn about preventing it or noticing signs and taking signs seriously through all your reading and your experience?
Well, what prompted me to change course and head immediately to the hospital was just that snapping feeling, and then it felt like somebody just jammed like a fork into my heart. But so it was super painful, and so I was just like, there is no way this is not what I think it is. So, um, but I learned like that these things can happen in just the blink of an eye when
Yeah.
there's no forewarning really that they're going to happen. And so,
Right. I think we think that we would notice it, right?
yeah. And, I've had a, a lot of friends ask me, what do you think this is? It's like, if you think you're having some issue with your heart, that is not anything to mess around with.
No, dude, it's
And,
totally like it, it's just so easy to be like it's probably not the worst case thing. I'll put that off and like so I've thought about this kind of thing lately. When something happens with my dog or something, and you look up on the internet, you get a million different explanations for what it might be. Worst case scenario, or it's nothing. I've just kind of defaulted to if there's any sense that it could be something bad, I'll just take them to the vet. And I've been lucky a couple of times because it was
yeah.
something bad. I don't necessarily do that with myself, but I think that I should because I don't think, as you experience, that these situations are like we would expect that they would be because we've never encountered them until we have.
Yeah. And man, it was, the thing that made my anxiety kind of spiral was that, when you're looking for information on something, you just get on the internet and it's right there at your fingertips. But what I ran into was I could not find a single instance of any, like a story or article or anything about a person my age going through this experience. So I'm just like, oh my God, this must be super rare or something. And then that just leads me to believe, well, if it's rare, they must not know that much about it, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And
Right.
so it was really, really tough because there was just no information out there. And I
This is
would,
while you were feeling that you were looking this up.
no, 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 no. This is in
Okay.
the
After.
time afterwards, like just because what I was looking for is kind of seeing what people's lives were like after
Yeah.
experiencing
Okay.
something like that. I couldn't find anything, and literally not a single parallel story about someone my age, like primarily a male. And I remember going to the American Heart Association website, and I felt like a lot of the stuff was geared more towards women.
Yeah,
I don't know
dude.
if that's true, but
Yeah.
that was my experience.
They don't, for situations that are rare. And again, for anybody who's just tuning in, this is long before the vaccine situation. When there's rare diseases, I learned this with my mom's situation, who had a rare disease for 18 years. She was told when she first had it that there's nothing anybody could do. She'd die in 2 years. She lived for 18 years, and there turns out there was things that could be done. It's just that the doctors who we encountered initially, they didn't know. It was outside their realm of knowledge, and it was very hard to find research on it. You had to be like real specific with your Google searches and ask like
Yeah.
it's very difficult. And they do have these rare disease organizations now where they try and give support to people with rare diseases. But the fact is, if they haven't identified enough people that have something, then there's not much research or not much trials, like health trials going on to try and figure out what the issue is with these things. And if these things are less rare than they think, then there could be real problems that are overlooked, because sometimes things are actually a little more prevalent that they call rare because they don't want to acknowledge for whatever
Yeah.
reason.
And I don't know that this was necessarily rare. It was just near impossible to find any story that shared any common ground. And that's all I was looking
Yep.
for. I was like hoping to find, some story about some guy like who the same thing happened. I couldn't find it. So that is,
So you didn't know what to do next, basically.
yeah. And so it's just like, there's no playbook. I mean, there is, as far as you can make all the lifestyle changes and take the medicine, but that's not, it's not necessarily going to help those negative thoughts you're having and
Right.
help you go to sleep at night because you're
Which
sitting up worrying.
Yeah, that's a factor too. The anxiety and the focus on that is definitely, a lot of people might not agree with this, but we can think ourselves into issues sometimes, especially when anxiety can overwhelm us. And I know I've been through that before in my life, and that's something that we both understood about each other when we first met years ago.
Yeah, that was something that I had terrible, terrible panic attacks for years, really, and really a side effect of this whole experience for me. And I hate to say this, but it almost made, if it took having a heart attack to get rid of panic attacks, well, so be it. But that's kind of what happened. Just one of the medications that I've taken, and I'm not a medical professional. I'm not suggesting that anybody go out and,
You're just saying what helped you. Yeah.
yeah, I'm just giving my experience. So I don't know what it would do to you or anyone else, but I noticed after probably like a month and a half, 2 months, it's like I stopped having them, and I kept waiting to have them again. And knock on wood, 10 years later, I still am not having them. So it's if there's a silver lining, that's it.
Yeah.
For me.
What other changes did you make afterwards?
I mean, I was, especially for about the first year or two after, I was super careful about what I ate. And so I started reading every food label that came my way. Just really just
What,
made
what were you
pretty
looking for on the food
sensible.
labels?
I didn't really know. I was looking at the sodium content a lot, saturated fat, um, cholesterol, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Did your doctors or nutrition kind of steer you in this direction, or was this based on your own research?
it was kind of a self-imposed thing, but I
Yeah.
did
I mean, our
eventually go
diets are
to a.
terrible in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm definitely not as diligent now as I was then, but I don't know. I have a way different outlook on my life now than I did then, so maybe that plays into it somewhat. But
Yeah. So diet change, that's, I mean, that is, I think, the most obvious, possibly most difficult for a lot of people change to make, because we're so habituated, if that's, if you even said that word right, in what we eat, and it's so easy to have the junk food or what. I know I have a sweet tooth, and I beat myself up about it a lot. I just need to get it out of the house. If I'm around it, then I'm probably gonna, eat the Oreo or whatever. I got to surround myself with stuff that's healthier. I used to tell my friends back in the day, when occasionally I would partake in marijuana, occasionally I would say, man, every time we smoke marijuana, get all the chocolate out of the house and let's fill it with carrots and broccoli. Okay, if we're gonna have the munchies, let's do it. Let's do
there
it
you go,
healthy. Yeah.
problem solved.
So we got a couple comments here. Denver Attaway says drinking more water is a game changer, and man, it really is. Like, it's so. My dad had a stroke. He died last year. He had a stroke in 2019, and one of the things after a stroke they tell patients is you gotta make sure you're getting a consistent amount of water. And I think we don't realize sometimes how little water we're drinking,
Yeah,
until that's kind of pointed out. Because I started following his routine that they were telling him, because I'm like, I'm not drinking enough water.
yeah. My carbon footprint is not probably very enviable given the amount of uh, bottles
Like,
of water I drink,
right.
but I start the day off taking 7 pills and just try to drink. I used to drink a lot of like Diet Coke. I don't do that so
Yeah.
much anymore. And but yeah, another thing, my wife and I did. I think it was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years after all of this happened. Um, she agreed to run a half marathon with me. So
Oh yeah.
we, neither of us had ever done it before. We trained together and did it, finished it. And to me, that was a pretty big accomplishment. And I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
if this guy didn't
Right.
crap out on me during this experience, I think we're headed in the right direction.
Definitely. Those are tough. Denver says you can keep a glass pitcher with lemon and cucumber, herbs like a mint sage. It's like on your next to your bed or whatever. It's I do the same thing with water bottles. Every morning I get up, I take my yacht across the Atlantic, and then I get on my private jet and I leave my carbon footprint all the way to my plastic bottles of water that I then throw in the ocean to to help. But yeah, so what pill? You said you took pills every morning. What are they? They vitamins?
Yeah, I take, well, I take a vitamin, I take a fish oil pill, aspirin, um, 2 blood pressure medicines, a statin for cholesterol, and a blood thinner, which, and I've been on all of these
Yeah.
for the last all of those with the exception of one, which is a newer addition for the last 10 years. So I figure if it's worked this far, let's just stick with
Isn't
it.
aspirin
So
a blood thinner also?
it is, yeah. So I actually only take that one every other day because I'm already on taking Plavix. So
What is that?
it's a blood thinner.
Oh, that's the other one. Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of people are. I think they're on it for a few months after having stents placed. I could be wrong about that, but in my case, it sounds like I'm going to be on it uh, maybe forever. And
Yeah.
so far, it's worked, so that's fine with me.
Do you monitor your blood pressure, your cholesterol regularly?
I go to my cardiologist regularly. I get blood work done regularly to monitor all that. And really, the biggest challenge I've had over the years is ever since I was a younger person, I would see spikes in my blood pressure when I would go to the doctor. I don't know how I know they were spikes because that was the only time my blood pressure was being taken. But
Right.
so I would see, I should say, I guess I would see that my blood pressure was high, and so
Right.
that's been the biggest struggle. It still,
What was it? Do you remember?
yes, I do remember when all of that happened. It was 180 over 110, which is
Okay.
horrible.
Yeah. I used to check my dad's after my dad had a stroke. I was in there every couple of hours checking his blood pressure, and if it was too high, you start to worry, and you don't want to make him worry because the stress. We talked about the anxiety earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, stress can jack your blood pressure up.
Yeah. And it was in the hospital that day, it was 180 over 110. It's obviously not that high now. But it's, so that's something that I'll always have to battle, I think.
And it can be a scary to check it. So
Yes,
it can
I
be
agree.
like, I don't want to check it because I'm worried what it'll be and what the implications of that'll be, which
Yes.
is not good. If it is high, you want to, nip it in the bud.
I couldn't have said it better. That's 100% true for me.
Do you feel like leading up to it that there were any signs or anything? I know it's a silent killer and there's not a lot of, overt physical signs that are different from, other not,
No.
life-threatening conditions.
I had even had, I would say 3 or 4 months prior to that, I had an echo done.
What's that?
I think that's what it was. Some sort of,
It's like a heart check.
yeah, it was, and there was nothing wrong then. And this clot, I guess, just lodged and caused that particular artery to be 100% blocked. So
Is that something that can be screened if people want to go get checked on a regular basis to make sure they're not having similar issues?
I think there are things that, yes, and I don't know what all of them are. I know what I usually do is do a stress test, which basically you go in, they put some leads on you, you get on a treadmill, they crank it up, and you try to get your heart to a certain rate, and then immediately you jump onto a table and they do like a scan of your heart, like when it's still kind of on fire.
See how much stress it could take.
And so that's, I'm sure there are many other things you can do too. I just have not undergone any of those. So
what would you recommend to people who might be in a situation that I described a little while ago? Maybe they're in their 30s, they're in their 40s, and they don't want to imagine a situation where that happens, and they
The short answer to that would be address it, because you don't want to have to address having a heart attack, especially, 30s or 40s. You have young children. I did not at the time. I do now. And so, that's always in the back of my mind. What if this happened when I'm with one of them?
Yeah,
So I just try
right.
to push that out of play, think about something a little bit more positive. But
And what should people do? Should they schedule a checkup with a doctor that they trust? A lot of people don't trust doctors, and I do understand that. My position on doctors are: you want to do your research on doctors that you are getting evaluated by, and you want to recognize that they also have a limitation of knowledge, and in certain situations, when they don't understand something, doctors sometimes can be arrogant, not always, and their arrogance can lead them to concluding things about stuff that they don't actually understand. I think recognizing that about doctors and recognizing that they do have valuable knowledge that they can help us with, but as soon as that runs up, as soon as you come to a situation, like I always relate it back to my mom because it's why I think this way. We can help you. We can help you. Oh, wait a minute. We don't know what this is. We've never seen it. You're going to die in 2 years. That's when a doctor has lost their usefulness to me because they don't actually know that. So it's like go see doctors and recognize what they can do and what they can't do. And use what they can help you with, in my opinion.
I mean, my take on that would be find a doctor that you really like.
Right.
Because if it's somebody you don't like, or they're
Yeah,
condescending or whatever, your chances are you're not going to
yeah. Right. Nobody
take
wants.
heed of what they say.
I'll say this: don't ever go to a doctor who works at a hospital where the people who are employed there, the doctors and nurses, have 50 different gender pronouns, because you could be going under the knife and accidentally call your doctor a he, and you could see the look on his face when he gets angry, and you don't know what's going to happen once the anesthesia kicks in after you've misgendered this doctor. Don't go to John Hopkins, is what I'm saying. But I'm joking, but I get your point. Yeah, you don't want a hostile doctor. You want somebody who's open-minded, who'll listen to you, which that's not always the case. But it's such a night and day different thing. When there was a doctor who told me I was going to die because I was in there with my dad, who he had a condition that I had found was exactly like a rare side effect of the vaccine. I mean, exactly. And I found it. It had just been published about a month earlier, and I found it on Google Scholar. And I took it with us to the doctor because the recommendation was, if this happened, do not get the booster shot. And so I wasn't bringing it to this doctor to say, is it the vaccine? It's not. I was bringing it because I knew that the booster shot was about to be recommended to my dad. And I talked to the guy, and he was just presuming that he didn't know what caused it, whatever. And I said, is it possible that it's a reaction to the vaccine? And he scoffed at me, got angry, told me I was going to die. He asked me if I was vaccinated. I said, I'm not. Told me I was going to die if I didn't go get vaccinated. And then I pulled out the study that had just been published, and I had highlighted all the portions, and I was like, this describes my dad exactly. This is not an unreasonable question. And he had a little bit of a short circuit and then told me I was going to die again. And then we went and found a new doctor. And that new doctor, I was very cautious when we went in. And I was like, I know I'm not supposed to ask this, but I'm just kind of worried because this looks like what happened to my dad, and I know the booster is going to be recommended. And she was like, oh, no, I've actually seen this. You can ask any question you want. It was such a relief to be able to be open and talk to a doctor that didn't care about being right, that cared about, helping the patient. And that's what I look for now when it comes to that.
Yeah. I wholeheartly agree with you that I mean, I think the key for me was that I found a doctor that I like as a person.
Yeah.
And I trust him, and I feel like he genuinely has my best interest in
Yeah.
mind. But
That's funny to me. It's like if somebody's like, what's going on? It's like, well, I know a doctor. He's a great doctor. I don't trust him as far as I can throw him, but here's his number.
yeah, I mean, there's certainly been doctors that I've been to, and maybe what they were telling me was accurate, but the way it was presented to me, it was in a kind of a condescending
Totally.
fashion.
Yeah.
And
I don't like
it
that.
makes me not want to ever go back to them. Or so I don't know.
Absolutely.
And I'm not really in a position to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do in that regard. But if you do believe in, modern medicine, find a doctor that you like and that you trust. And
that's important.
But I think I would be better equipped to tell somebody that, I don't know what it's like to die, but I know what it's like to think that you're about to die and everything that goes along with that. And
that's so terrifying, man. I can't imagine what must have been going through your mind.
Yeah, a lot of things did. And so I guess my aim would be to just reach out to anyone that has experienced something like this and just let them know that I probably have a pretty good idea of how they're feeling. And in my case, there was light at the end of the tunnel and finally there. So,
and that's a great idea too. I know you had talked about starting a podcast of your own to put this information out there because, like you said, you looked it up and you had a hard time finding other examples that you could model what to do after. And that's not because there's not examples out there. It's just maybe it's not focused on and it's harder to find. So if you can get people together in some sort of forum or whatever, text message chain, whatever it is, then you start to have people that have similar but unique experiences that everybody can add a little bit that all helps each other. And I think that's a fantastic idea because that is like, that's a silent killer. There's no out of the ordinary signals that we're very familiar with anyway. I encourage you very much to do that because you've had, I cannot imagine that experience. I actually remember, Jack, when you told me that you had a heart attack. I remember where I was. We have those memories that, kind of, we go through everyday life. A lot of things are similar every day. Everything seems like one long day. And then we have moments where it's like, whoa, that are vivid to us. And when it was a text message, you had said it, I was in Kroger and I was actually writing because Kroger used to have a nice Starbucks area, years ago when this happened. And I just sat back and I was like, damn, fuck, I'm so glad you're okay. But then I was just like, that shit could happen to me.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
And I've actually met a couple of people. I've had a couple of people reach out to me after reading an article about my experience that was published years ago, but and they were in the same boat. They said, you are the only person that's I've read about that had a similar experience. So the more that started to happen, and then once I hit this milestone of 10 years, I started thinking more seriously about doing that. So that's and I've had some really good feedback thus far from people that have asked to talk with me. And so hopefully that'll be off the ground before too long.
Yeah, you could bring people on and they could recount the experiences and what they learned leading up to it and afterwards. What is the article? Is it online still?
It is. I'm trying to remember the name of the organization. I can't remember offhand what it was, but if you type in my name, my first and last name, Jack Hatley, and then heart attack,
it'll show up first. Yeah,
first thing that pops up.
Right. Yeah. That is interesting to me. That's actually that idea of rare conditions, and again, not necessarily rare, but rarely talked about, really focused on. It, because through my experiences with my mom's illness, where I think at the time it was called paraneoplastic cerebral degeneration, it's where your body has a microscopic cancer that it attacks and it kills it. But along with attacking and killing the cancer, it also attacks and kills something in your cerebrum. I always say this word wrong. Your brain that is called Purkinje cells. I'm probably pronouncing those wrong, but what those cells are cells that regulate the communication between thoughts and your mobility. So we don't think about it. Well, we don't have, I need to move my arm. It just happens, but there's still a system of communication that exists there. Well, the system of communication for her was completely destroyed by her own body when it was going after this cancer. And that created a disconnect to where she couldn't communicate. So she was not a paraplegic in the sense that people understand it, like her spine wasn't severed, but the system of communication didn't work anymore. So she lost her ability to use her arms and legs and was wheelchair bound. Now, over the years, they had never seen it before. There's less than 500 known cases of this in the world. You couldn't find any useful information or case studies to help. My parents had no idea what to do, and the people who they looked to for help had no advice for them other than, you got 2 years, we're sorry. It was like, you're on your own, you got to figure shit out. And what you do come to discover, what I have in the years since and during it through research, is there are sporadic cases that you can find, or at least there used to be. The internet's changed a lot, where people are telling their stories here and there, and people can learn things. Because in my mom's case, she was misdiagnosed for 6 months or so. Actually, I think it was closer to 8 months. They labeled it 7 or 8 different things. She went to every single doctor. We took her to New York. We took her to the Mayo Clinic. Nobody could really give any helpful information other than, we're sorry. I mean, and sometimes a few of them would even, well, we don't think she's going to die. Well, yes, she is. I'm a doctor. Okay. I had to tell a couple doctors, don't ever say that in front of them again, because it's demoralizing. You don't want to demoralize people when they're already searching for something. And fortunately, my parents, they were relentless in their search and their willingness to keep fighting and figuring this out as best they could, which is, it's very difficult, especially if you everywhere you look, you're getting pushback. But once you do find a breakthrough, and you can find people who do know a little bit here and a little bit there, and you can put pieces of information together and start to collect stories where they can all help each other from case studies, then you can start to find hope, because then you start getting directed to the people with medical knowledge who actually have an open mind and are working on this stuff. It's just you didn't know how to find it before. In the case of my mom, because it was such a rare thing, and the language, the medical language was so weird, it took me a while to even know what questions to type into the internet. Sure. to turn stuff up, because I didn't go to medical school. I didn't know what most of the stuff meant and what I read about it. And so it's like, how do I even ask a question about this? It's the people are out there with knowledge and with stories that can all help each other, but they're hard to find. And it sounds to me like what you're interested in doing is creating a way to bring some people that experienced what you did together, so all of you guys can help each other and help others in the future.
Yep, that's exactly my goal. And I think it just sharing experiences like that with other people, I think would really go a long way for someone who's maybe experienced that, like today, see what's in front of them. And
absolutely,
to realize that your life can go back to a point where you want it to be. And fortunately, I'm at that point, and very thankful.
It's like a lot of things we don't want to think about when we're in our 20s and 30s and 40s are things that we must think about if we want to take control of our health and our life. And it's just, what am I going to learn if a lot of people don't go to the doctor a lot in their 30s. I've learned that.
I'm guilty.
Me too.
I just never got sick, so I never.
Right. Yeah, and you don't know what's there, and it's almost like if nobody tells me about it, maybe nothing will happen. But like,
obviously flawed logic, but
it is, and I do understand the idea of like. I do believe people can manifest issues. So I know some people believe, well, if a doctor tells you this or that and you start to believe this or that. I know Native Americans have spent a lot of things where Native Americans, some stories where people have thought themselves into serious illnesses and died. It's just crazy. But it's like, I think you have to balance that knowledge of the power of your mindset with the need to get your physical organs and your body checked, knowing that you can be in control of this stuff, and the best way to make sure that you are doing the right thing. And I don't do the things that I'm saying right now. I know that I need to. And talking to you, it gives me more of that urgency to not put things off that I know I should be getting checked out a little bit more. I don't always take the best care of myself. I don't sleep as much as I need to. I drink too much coffee. I need to go get a physical probably. It's been a little bit longer than it needs to be. And when something happens, it's too late. It's like being a prepper. I was talking about this the other day. People people are casual preppers, They're casual preppers, but when you're a casual prepper, it doesn't matter when the shit hits the fan, okay? Like what happened in Hawaii.
Here and there.
Right. Hawaii, they had these fires and people couldn't even leave their house to escape the fire. You go outside, you still get the fire. If you're not prepared for that, it's too late to prepare. So I was equating it the other day to, you have to, if you're going to be a prepper, you need to be a prepper. You need to act like you would if Christmas every year was on a different day and you didn't know what day that was until Christmas morning. All right. Then you'd always have fucking presents ready. All right. You'd never not have a gift ready to go if you didn't know when Christmas morning was coming. And it's just the sense of urgency can fall to the side when we fall into this sense of normalcy where we think everything's going to be okay, when there is going to come a day when it won't. Jack, I want to go through a few comments with you that on Rockfin here, if you don't mind. And then
Sure.
if you're cool with it, if you have time, I know you have kids, we can just stay and chat a little bit longer, maybe about other subjects, because you're an interesting guy, you're a funny guy, and I'd love to just chat about, we can talk about lighter subjects or whatever else. If you're down.
I'm in.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's see what we got here over on Rockfin. I think some good health advice, actually. So what's cool, Jack, about I'm what they call a conspiracy theorist, although I'm not what, like, I don't know. I have no idea what your politics are, but I'm not what, like, the Biden administration would call a modern conspiracy theorist, which they just define as like a white nationalist terrorist racist. I've been a conspiracy theorist since searching for aliens was what, how you defined conspiracy theorist. Although nowadays conspiracy theorists question the people who claim aliens exist, but that is a whole nother subject for another day. So there's a lot of people who watch the show, who communicate the chats and stuff, they have so much knowledge when it comes to health, natural health, alternative health, and all kinds of great stuff. And I'm seeing some of that right here. So Denver says that the best known herb for the heart in Western herbalism is hawthorn, which is a small tree or shrub that grows throughout the northern hemisphere. The fruits, the flowers, and the leaves, processed into tinctures. I don't know if I said that right, and other kinds of extracts available in capsules or tablets in the U.S. and other parts of the world. Interesting. Do you know anything about?
I don't. I don't. I'll just leave it at that. I don't know much about that. I tried some supplements, in the past, and that didn't work out so well. So I just kind of, I just kind of stay in my lane.
Right. Yeah. I'm not. I am by no means an expert on this stuff. I've bought a lot. My mom was a nurse, and I know your wife is a nurse practitioner, and she has all these old medical books. And I bought a bunch of like military, like Army. I try and find the most up to date Army shit hits the fan, training manual, because they release one every couple of years that just says, okay, this mushroom is poisonous. This, you can eat this, you can't eat that. So I try to keep that nearby. But I don't have a vast knowledge in that. But I know a lot of people, a lot of people here do. Another comment here. This also comes in herbal teas. Herbal teas, I like herbal teas. I don't know if they help me because of what's in them. And I typically follow the advice of people in the propaganda report community, what they've recommended, or the fact that it just feels good to drink this tea that smells healthy, and it feels right.
I'm on board with that.
And I think mindset, it really does. Denver says, that doctor sounds familiar. This was actually a rare case. So he says, let me guess, the doctor that gaslit you was between 34 and 35, not long out of residency. Actually, it wasn't. I think in a lot of cases it might be like that, but it was the other way around. The doctor that gaslit us was a guy who he had been my dad's doctor and my uncle's doctor for a long time. This was an older doctor, and I was taken aback by his visceral reaction to what was going on. I think there was probably some kind of pressure put on him. I don't know. And then the other doctor that we went to was a woman who was probably 34 or 35 years old. And what was interesting about that is that this was at a hospital that the second time we went to see her, they changed their rules arbitrarily. We used to go there all the time. My mom had to go there a lot. And every single time they had a new COVID rule. None of them ever made sense. And we came this one particular time when my dad was going there, and out of nowhere, they had all of these new signs everywhere. I always thought it was funny because we had been there a week before, and then we come now, and there's all these big plastic advertising signs. It's like, make sure you're wearing your mask. Make sure a week before you didn't have to have that on, right? And make sure you're washing and doing all this. And this was towards the end of the pandemic. And then I go into the bathroom, and then on the bathroom wall has all this stuff about, here's why you need to wash your hands and do this. And then on the mirror, here's why you need to make sure you wear your mask along with washing your hands. And then there's the soap dispenser also on the mirror. And on the soap dispenser, it says, out of order. How am I supposed to wash my hands if the soap dispenser's out of order? You just urged me to rub my hands raw, which I do anyway because I have OCD. The soap dispenser's out, but then they did not let me in. So my dad's about to go in, and at that point in time, he had a stroke. His lung disease, which it's pretty confident that was caused by the vaccine. The doctor supports that. This doctor. He needed someone in there with him. And all they cared about was, am I vaccinated? And what I said to them was, my dad came down with this condition a month after he got the shot. Is it possible it's something else? Yes, but we have looked at some of the other causes that we've been told might have caused it. Like, this is not, we were very thorough about this. This wasn't like, I wasn't just being flippant. This was a thorough thing. And my uncle developed the exact same condition as my dad a month after he got the shot. And so what I told them was, are you telling me that you're only going to let me in if I get the same shot that both my dad and my uncle got, that for my dad is the very reason that we're here right now, according to the doctor that we're going to see? At least she can't say 100% because I don't want to put words in her mouth because she's a very good doctor, but says that it's a very highly likely possibility, and they would not let me in. And so about 3 to 5 minutes later, The doctor walks out, escorts me in herself. And mad respect for her to that, because it was people in the lobby following bullshit rules. And she was like, I'm not going to deal with this. And she led me in. So in answer to your question, a shout out to the millennials on that one, because it was them who did the good job on that doctor. I guess that was a long-winded explanation for that. What's up, y'all? Says Very Safe Biolabs. We got great show, says Greg. Thank you, Greg. And a few more comments here. Christopher Hobbs, PhD, herbalist, botanist, and myocologist, am I saying that right? And research scientist. This is just all information to look into if anybody's interested in it. If I didn't have a healthy heart, I would have died and been at least in a coma at age 12 when my blood glucose was 1600 to 1700 before I was officially diagnosed as diabetic. That's wow. Denver, are you still diabetic? Is that something that you're dealing with? My uncle was diabetic for years and years, and then he started. So my uncle's who I think of when I say people in their 30s, 40s, even 50s for him never go to the doctor. He did not go to the doctor for decades. Vietnam vet, and he had he developed diabetes, and then he started going to the doctor, and they diagnosed him, and then he started taking care of himself, and then it was like his diabetes were gone when he just started living a healthier lifestyle. And it was like, wow, it's crazy. See, you can buy a 3-gallon bush to plant at any herbal or vitamin store. Okay. All right. So the shots are bad. No question about it, says Greg. Yeah. Well, one of my old roommates was diabetic, and it seemed like the shots were pretty bad. And who likes shots anyway? You know, it's type 1 since age 12. Type 2 is what it sounds like. Yeah. Type 2 is what my uncle had. So, all right, man. So let's just, what else is going on with you? I have to say this, Jack. I know I told you this. I probably wouldn't have survived when I was in Chicago for that year if you hadn't have been my buddy. You know, I was so
likewise.
I was so out of place. So well, this is going to be the DMB XR, by the way, the subscriber only portion of the show. Go to patreon.com/propaganda report. If you want to subscribe for that, you'll get the DMB ad free. Take out the ads for all the subscribers. And you also get that combined with the subscriber only content that I put together into your own private Patreon RSS feed. You can put it in any podcast platform. Uploads as soon as I upload the show. So what I often tell people about it, Jack, is, yeah, everybody talked like this guy. You know, I don't know if you remember that girl who kind of liked me. She was a bit of a bigger girl. When I left, she sang at that karaoke bar. They had like a little
called that.
Yeah, they had like a little party for me. The improv group that I was performing with, and she sang "Leaving on a Midnight Train to Georgia" with me. It was very, very sweet. She was cool. She's super, super cool, but she was very, I'd never experienced these types of personalities before in my life. And I loved the diversity, but I was just kind of out of place. And then we were in the same Second City writing class together, and we started hanging out. And what I tell people is that we would go to bars. I think Friar Tuck is the one I'm thinking about. And we'd get these half pitchers of beer, or maybe I'd order a sweet tea or something, and then people would go, "What?" And everybody would just kind of turn their head. "What'd you say? Sweet tea?" And then that made us, like, we were such a novelty that made me, anyway, more of a redneck than I've ever been in my life because of how much attention these people up there. Yeah, give me some sweet tea, man. They just loved it, like we were a Beanie Baby or something.
Yeah, that was definitely a colorful first year in Chicago, that's for sure.
Yes, it was.
Surprised we both made it out of that one, actually. But
one of my favorite stories about that is we would go. There's all Chicago's kind of like New York. It's open most of the night. You can always find somewhere open, and we always did find somewhere open. And there was this guy in this part of town that we would hang out with who was this just huge black guy. He's probably like six. You know what I'm talking about? He arm wrestled your Navy SEAL cousin in the bar that one night. And so this guy, we'd see this guy around a lot. And huge guy, and he told us one time that he's like, yeah, I'm roommates with bad Leroy Brown. That's my roommate. And we're like, all right, bad Leroy Brown. And I think he kind of liked us because, we're pretty likable, and we bullshit with him and whatnot. And the one time your cousin came into town, he was a Navy SEAL. This guy is arm wrestling people. I can't remember if he beat your cousin. I just remember them being locked in it. And I was very impressed because your cousin didn't look huge until he's arm wrestling somebody. I'm like, look at the biceps on this guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being there, but I was probably at that point in the night, I was, brain was not fully functional, but that was, I think we definitely saw the seedy underbelly of Chicago.
Absolutely. I mean, we went, there was a redneck bar in Chicago that was kind of in a bad part of town where you could go find all the rednecks there, but you had to get on the L train. And my first time riding the L train, it was late at night, and there was nobody else on it except for like 2 or 3 other people. And then some guy opens the train cars coming from one train to the other, who's got his shirt off, his pants are basically around his ankles, and he's got he's got shotgun shells around his neck. He's going, y'all don't want nothing about this. I'm like, what the fuck is going? I mean, I'd only been on MARTA leading up to that.
That bar, I know which one you're talking about. I went there last summer. I met a friend of mine in Chicago, and he had never been. I told him all about it, and we got there, and it's been completely renovated. So it's like where like legitimate citizens hang out now.
Yeah, and we didn't want to be where legit. We wanted to be where the underbelly was. Yeah, that's how we liked it. Yeah.
Have a memory of that place. I think I feel like it was Halloween or close to Halloween. They had a Halloween party, and the time changed, and they stayed open an hour later. So essentially, we were there until 6 o'clock in the morning. Which,
yeah, we were out pretty late many times, and so the Leroy Brown guy and the fist fighting lesbian that wanted to fight us. There are a couple things that come to mind right now. I just remember there. I think it was after your Navy SEAL cousin arm wrestled that guy. I think I might have arm wrestled him too, and he beat. I mean, the guy was a big guy. He whipped my ass, and I think I got mad, and I told him how to whip his ass in basketball, which I would have. Like, I'm pretty sure I would have. I'm pretty good at basketball. Okay, I'm not fucking NBA level, but I'm better than I look at baskbasketball. Like I'm like white men can't jump.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah, so like I told him, I was like, I will fucking whip your ass in 1-on-1 right now. And it was like 3:30 in the morning, right? And he was like, all right. And he took me up on that challenge, and he was trying to arrange for us to go to the south side of Chicago. And I was going to play him in 1-on-1 basketball on the south side at like 4 a.m. in the morning. And I was just so amped up because I was pissed he beat me in arm wrestling that I was ready to dominate in 1-on-1. And thank God you intervened and told me it's probably not a good idea to go play 1-on-1 basketball in the south side of Chicago at 4 a.m.
I don't think we'd be here right now had that gone down. But I think one of my favorite memories is of you getting locked out of your...
Yes, I did. I got locked out of my place. So I will respond to Very Safe Biolabs. I understand that. He says, Brad looks like he's never touched a basketball, which is why every time I've been the only white guy in a gym so many times in my life. I've grown up playing. I've scored 50 points in a game before. Very Safe Biolabs. And every time it doesn't matter. I could be 9 for 9 on 3-pointers. And I could have 35 points and 8 rebounds. And if I'm playing on a blacktop, they could put a black guy in a wheelchair on me, and I'll dribble around him and score on him, and they'll go, motherfucker got scored on a white boy. It did not matter. They just progressively, it's just, it's fun. Like, I love playing basketball for one of those reasons. But yes, I don't look like I play at all. So yeah, there was one night where I don't even remember exactly how it happened, but the first thing that I remember is that my door shut in the mid, like, 3 a.m. probably after we had gone out. And I had locked myself out of my apartment, which was kind of near Wrigley Field. And I couldn't get in. And the front office, it wasn't open at the time. And I had on boxers. Ladies, if you don't know this, we don't throw boxers away until they just like disintegrate. And these boxers were basically a waistband. That's basically what they were. Just a massive hole. And so I'm standing there with basically naked with no way to get into my apartment in 4 hours until the front office opens. And I'm like, well, fuck. What do I do now?
Sleep in the stairwell.
And that's exactly what I did. I went to the stairwell and I was like, I'm going to sit down here. And I sat down in the stairwell. I lived in like a 20-story apartment building on like the 13th floor. And I was there for a few minutes. And then people kept, like it's 3 people kept coming in. And so I went to a different floor. And people kept I kept having to change floors until I found one that didn't have people constantly moving. And I think I ended up on like almost the top floor of the building. And then once it finally got to be around opening time, and like you don't know embarrassment until you're sitting nearly butt naked with boxers with a giant hole in them, sleeping in the corner of a stairwell on the 19th floor of an apartment building in the middle of Chicago as people are walking by and going to work and shit. That is, hi, I'm just locked out of my apartment. Don't look at my dick. I'm just locked out of my apartment. And so I had to make that walk once the place opened, and I just covered my hands, and I just kind of walked to the office and knocked on the door, and they see this guy covering his crotch. Can I help you? Yes, you can. I locked myself out. It's been a very, very trying 4 or 5 hours. Yes, those are one of those moments where it's like, maybe I should stop drinking so much. So I was like 25 or 24 at the time, I think, and we partied and forgot my key.
We did.
So we went to this. I lived near Boys Town, right? And Jack and I used to go to this bar we called the Aquarium Bar because the bartender was a gay guy who liked us. And, we would often get the benefit of strong drinks for a low price, and so there was
served well after the place
right. We could
up.
Absolutely. And so there was one night we went to a lesbian bar a little bit down the street, and we were just the life of the party. We were dancing with all the lesbians, right? And there was a lot of lipstick lesbians here, okay? A lot of attractive women experimenting, I think. And they kind of liked us. And so we're having a party in the middle of this lesbian bar dance floor, and all the lesbian girls are around us dancing, having a good time.
Tolerating us anyway.
Right.
So.
Well, there was one lesbian who did not tolerate us, and that was like the leader.
Leader is, that's
in no universe could this one be described as a lipstick lesbian. This was the home run hitting, softball playing, plaid shirt, cut off sleeve lesbian, short haircut, looks like a construction worker, and she threatened to fight us. She wanted to fist fight both of us because we were dancing with her girls.
Yeah, that's...
And I don't know who terrified me more, bad Leroy Brown guy or the fighting construction lesbian. I don't know.
It's certainly a toss-up there.
Totally, yeah.
If I remember both of those people correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, so I used to do this improv show there, and after the show, there was the Dancing Naked Boys, because the show was in Boys Town, which is like, we're ending an improv show, and you got a dozen naked dudes stretching when you go in the back, and it's like, all right. At one point in time, they asked me if I wanted to be in the show, and I was like, no. No, thank you. I don't want to be in the show. Does it pay well? Okay, no, I don't want to be in the show. Yeah, yeah. So it was definitely some. I mean, we could probably talk about Chicago stories for a pretty long